Hello Year 4, let's get started with today's English. As you know, we've been reading George's Marvellous Medicine by Roald Dahl. We're going to pause that for today and have a look at a different type of writing. Today's learning objective is, can I identify features of recipe writing? Recipe books are really good if you want to learn how to make things in the kitchen. Pause the video to go and see if you've got any recipe books at home. They could be quite useful this week. Don't worry if not though, we're going to have a look at some together today. This is the first recipe we're going to have a look at today, and it's from a special book called Revolting Recipes, and they're all linked to Roald Dahl stories. This first one, of course, is related to George's Marvellous Medicine, and it's called George's Marvellous Medicine Chicken Soup. Let's have a closer look. So what do we find in a recipe? It's supposed to help us to make things in the kitchen, to make different types of food. But what do we expect to see when we look in a recipe book? Pause and have a closer look at this recipe and see what you notice. I found three really important things. The first thing I found was the title of the dish, so the name of the food that you're making. The second thing I found, which I've circled in blue, is a list of equipment and ingredients that you will need to be able to make that food. And the third and final thing, the most important thing, is in purple, and those are the instructions in chronological order to help you make that food. What does chronological order mean? Can you remember? It means in time order, so the order in which you need to do things. Now, if we look even closer at our list of equipment and ingredients, you'll see that there are some details that we really need. In here, you'll find important information, including how many people can you feed with the food that you're making, a list of equipment that you'll need. In this case, it seems quite simple, just a large saucepan, and the quantities, the amounts of the food that you'll need. And they will include units of measurement. For example, in here we've got 2.5 kilograms or 2.5 kilograms of chicken, 100 grams of mushrooms, or 15 millilitres of tarragon. You'll also find, like you would in a story, adjectives which I've highlighted in green for you. Unlike stories, they're not there just to make it more interesting. They're there to give you more information. For example, it says 3 carrots, but you need to know they should be 3 large carrots. If you only have 3 small carrots, you might not have enough. If we have a look at the main body of the text, so the main instructions, we can see lots of other features of writing as well, which are particularly important in recipes or instructions. Can you remember what the most important thing in instructions is? Yeah. Bossy verbs. Bossy verbs are actually called imperative verbs, and it's important that we call them that from now on. Imperative verbs are simply verbs, so they're action words or doing words, but they're giving us an instruction. So it's not optional, it's something we're being told to do. Pause the video and have a look at these 4 sentences. What are the bossy verbs or imperative verbs in these sentences? There we go. Tie your shoelaces. The doing word, the action there is tie. Put that down. The action is put. Find your coat. The action you have to do is the finding. And stand up. Well, stand is the action. So all of those 4 words are imperative verbs. Look at our recipe here. Can you find any imperative verbs in there? Pause the video and have a look. I found loads. Quite often they crop up at the beginning of the sentence. Like here, you have to quarter the chicken, so cut it into quarters. Place the chicken and onions in a large saucepan. Bring to the boil. Strain and reserve. Pick the meat. But it doesn't always come at the beginning. If you have a look at instruction number 7, it says before serving, add the meat and heat through. Add is actually the verb, that's the doing word in that sentence, but it doesn't come at the very beginning. So what does come at the very beginning? Before serving. That tells us when to do it. Can you remember what that's called? An adverbial. Remember back to our learning last week, we looked at adverbials in Roald Dahl's story, and they can tell you where, when, or how an action happens. And you find adverbials all over recipes. They're everywhere. Have a look back at this recipe, at our 7 steps. Pause the video, see how many adverbials you can find. Remember, where to do it, when to do it, or how to do it. Have a look. Goodness me, there are loads of these as well. Let's have a look at a few examples. So this one here, you have to chop 2 onions. But how do you do it? You roughly chop 2 onions. That shows us we don't have to be too neat about it. Place the chicken and onions. Well, where do you place it? In a large saucepan. That's another adverbial. There are loads of them. They're all over the place. And particularly at the bottom here, that's what comes at the beginning of our sentence. So that's a fronted adverbial because it comes at the front of the sentence and it comes before our imperative verb. Here we have another recipe. This one is for hot frogs and it comes from the story James and the Giant Peach. I'm not too sure about this recipe. But if we have a look at the ingredients that we need, actually, there are no frogs involved. We're all right. The list of equipment you need is slightly bigger this time, so I've circled it in blue. You need to be careful to give enough detail in the equipment so you know what you need. For example, in here it says pastry brush. If they hadn't been specific about it, you wouldn't know what kind of brush to use. Hairbrush? Toothbrush, clothes brush, it could be anything. So you need to be really specific. And again, we have our ingredients circled in red, including amounts and units of measurement as well. Have a look at these instructions in this recipe. There are 14 of them in total. Pause the video and find all of those imperative verbs. Remember, there should be at least one in every instruction. Have you found them all? Let's have a look. So again, mostly at the beginning of the sentences, but not always. We've got imperative verbs like make, cut, scoop, serve. All of those are giving us instructions and telling us what to do. Does it tell us how, when, or where to do those things? Again, pause the video. See how many adverbials you can find. Did you find some of these? They're everywhere. How? Using a pastry brush. How? With flour. Where? In the oven. When? Several times. Adverbials are everywhere. Your first task today is to play a game using imperative verbs and adverbials. What you need to do is play with somebody at home. Give them an imperative verb that they have to act out. So the examples I've got down here are sing, explore, or juggle. They have to mime the verb you give them, but they're going to think of an adverbial that tells them how, when, or where to do it. Your job is to guess what adverbial they've chosen. So my examples here, you might tell them to sing, they might decide how to sing. So they might decide to sing in an alien language. You then have to guess how they decided to sing. The same with this one, explore. You might tell them to mime exploring, and they might decide that where they're going to do it is in a haunted house. So they might be acting out being really scared. Or if you've told them to juggle, they might decide when to do it, by doing it whilst they're hopping. Your job is to watch carefully what they're doing and try and guess the adverbial. How, when, or where are they doing your action? For task 2 today, you need to go to Google Classroom and you'll find the recipe for Bruce Bogtrotter's cake, as well as the 2 recipes that we've already looked at today. We'd like you to write a list of all the imperative verbs, those bossy verbs that you can find. And this is where you can use any recipe books that you have at home as well. We'd also like you to write a list of the adverbials that you find. You need to make a list of how, when, or where the instructions are telling you to do things. These lists are going to be really useful for tomorrow's English lesson, so make sure you keep them safe. Have fun, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.